Check out the Sustainability Expo Europe October 1st and 2nd in Amsterdam. 500 plus expert speakers. Use a code SE Sustain 20 at checkout. Get 20% off.
Cool.
There we go. It's counting up. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sustainiacs. I'm Mike Vincent. I'm the Sustainiac every time we do this show. Here's another Sustainiac, but he's the guest on this show today. His name is Alex Blum, right? Blum. Sorry, Alex Blum. There's a Blum, I guess, with the umlauts, right?
Yeah.
Is Blum. Yeah. Okay.
You want to do that?
There's like a sustainable plant pot maker, right? Called Blum or something like that.
Yep.
Or maybe even two U's. I'm not sure. But Alex Blum, as he corrected me, and he is absolutely right. So he is your CEO, are you your founder as well, right? Is that right?
Co-founder,
of Bioplastics.
Yep.
Is that right?
That is correct.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad you're on here. We've been trying to make this happen for a while, and really, who's your guest co-pilot behind you with the gray?
That's
head?
Actually my co-founder. So we've been roommates for 7 years. Oh, you're probably talking about the cat here.
I'm talking about the cat.
I was talking about the guy that was going up the stairs over here. But
I was looking at the other shoulder.
Yeah, so this is my cat Trixie. Her name is short for Venatrix, which is Latin for huntress. Because the minute I got her, take this little kitten into my house, she runs off into a corner. I'm like, oh no, she's nervous. Nope, she was killing a cockroach, and I was just perfect. Wow, you're a little huntress, aren't you? And I was like, I got to work that into your name. So that's her.
That's a perfect reason to have a cat, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Just
get rid of all the little critters.
Exactly. And, there's some studies out there saying, petting an animal, whether dog or cat, it lowers your cortisol levels, right? It's a great de-stressing. And as somebody who also works in startups, you must know this is incredibly
I have
stressful.
2 cats. I have 2 cats. At one point we had 2 cats, 5 bunnies, and 2 pigs.
Oh my gosh.
Which, if you've never had a pig, highly recommend it for a little while.
They're smart animals, aren't they? Yeah.
They're fantastic. I had no idea what kind of a personality a pig had. Amazingly smart, affectionate. And you know what? One thing I learned is they can jump.
Oh, yeah.
No joke. And they can jump, and they can jump surprisingly higher than you think.
What do you think those giant ham hocks are for, right? They got up,
it's
man.
Crazy. And they never shut up. They talk to you constantly. If you go out to see one there next to you, just they're just talking.
It's adorable. Yeah.
They're amazing. But dude, enough of that. Well, we're here, dude. So you got an amazing background, and you've done like everything so far in life that you could possibly do, except get stuck on the International Space Station. We know that. I asked you that already. Spoiler alert, people, he has never been stuck on there for 9 months or anything.
Never been
Applied Bioplastics? What I assume you'd only make bioplastics to apply them to something, right? But so what is aside from the obvious, what is it? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so Applied Bioplastics, our main product line, because we have 2 and we'll talk about both, but the thing that we sell to investors, the thing we talk most about, we'll talk about why we don't talk about the other one, but is that we enable large plastic compounders to reduce their carbon and microplastic footprint while saving money. And that's a really key piece there, is that, look, we can look across the failures of the bioplastics market for the last 30 years. And it's really disappointing. I mean, I was a kid when the bioplastics market came into being. I'm 34 years old.
Yeah, people don't realize how long it's been around, right?
Right. And please, if you're in the bioplastics world, don't be offended by this statement, but we have failed as a group. And the reality is, and what I mean by that is that after 31 years, we're less than 1% of the global plastics market.
Yeah.
That's failure right there. And it stinks, because when I was like 9, I grew up next to NASA. I lived right next to NASA as a kid. So, missed my chance to go to space, but, I remember
NASA, Houston.
Yeah. I grew up in Houston, in Clear Lake, probably like 10 minutes away from the Space Center. And I was a big space fan, and, I would read Popular Mechanics and Popular Science magazines. And I remember repeatedly, this is a recurring memory for me, I would read in those magazines, here's this new plastic. It's going to save the world. And then you never hear that company's name again. And that was, as a kid, frustrating because, like, Houston 90s capitalism, plastic was everywhere, man,
Oh
like,
yeah.
everywhere. And this was before we got the the littering is awful slash unlawful signs down here in Texas. So people were just throwing styrofoam containers out the windows of their cars and stuff. And as somebody who cares about nature, that always frustrated me. But I was like, maybe, you can't change consumer behavior. That's too hard, right? But what you can do is make the materials that they throw around willy nilly not terrible for the environment. And I kept reading these magazine articles. It was like, this is going to change the world. This is going to save the world. This is going to change the world, and they never materialize. And for my entire adult life, I've been curious why. Why is that? And the answer is really simple. When I started this company, when I was thinking about starting this company, I I decided to call a bunch of failed founders in the bioplastic space. And I know that's
Oh
unique,
wow.
kind of rude. Go ahead.
No, no, I'm just reacting to that. I was like,
Oh,
oh wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So you're right. Like,
You
it's
just
not.
call them up and say, "Hey, Alex, I heard you were a complete failure. Can I speak to
I
you?"
mean, yeah, like, some people are humble, and some people told me to go fuck off. But, like,
Yeah,
you're
right.
probably gonna have to bleep me there. But the thing is, some people were circumspect about what had gone wrong and were willing to share with somebody who was new to the industry, right?
Yeah.
And there was a list of excuses as long as my arm, but there was also some really good data in there. And the three things that I found out, there's three rules that they all broke. Rule number one: do not enter a commodities market with something more expensive than the incumbent. Now, I know that that is
Yeah.
not the most brilliant insight of all time, but every single one of them made that mistake. And I said, well, what was your plan? And they said, well, once we got some customers, we'd get to volume. And with volume, we could get like discounts on our supplies, and thus, bring the price down to close to commodity pricing. And I'm just like, that all sounds like a great plan, but how are you going to acquire the initial customers if they had to pay double, triple, quintuple what they were paying before? And they were like,
Mm, mm,
well,
mm.
that's why my company failed. I'm
Yeah,
like,
it'd be the only way you could get around that is like say in like the EV market where you get through tax, tax incentives and that
exactly.
type of stuff, where you get the government to help subsidize the new industry till it catches on, right?
Exactly. And the government is busy subsidizing the oil companies instead,
Yeah, yeah, they're
which.
not going to subsidize a competitor.
Oh, exactly, right. And they're saying it's a national security thing. We have to have energy, blah blah blah. And they're not entirely wrong. I'm not saying that they're stupid for
No,
subsidizing
the,
oil.
the infrastructure in our society is built natural hurdles.
Heavily dependent on it, right? So,
Yeah.
the only way that they could compete is if there was substantial regulation, reducing the cost of their materials, but there wasn't. So they
Mm,
failed. And then the
hmm.
next thing, if you survive the initial bit there, is you need to understand your market. And what the understanding of the plastics market that I gained is this: they paid off the machines that they use to make the plastic that we all, interact with daily 30 years ago. Like, this is like a 50 or 60-year industry. Those machines are kind of expensive, and the margins in this industry are low. So as a result, it took them a long time to pay off their equipment. But the thing about that equipment is it's modular. So if a part breaks, you just swap out that part. You don't have to replace
Mm,
the whole machine.
mm.
Even up to like the motors and the really important components, easy to hot swap, right?
Yeah.
So they're not going to buy new machinery, just flat out. They will not buy new machinery.
Yeah.
So if you come in saying, hey, I want to sell you a machine, they're going to tell you to take a long walk off a short pier, right? Like, that's just not what they're into. They're not going to buy it. So that's mistake number two. Guys spent years and millions of dollars building a machine to sell to the plastic industry without ever asking the plastic industry if they wanted to buy a new machine. And they
And
don't.
and the and to be clear, the reason they needed that new machine was because of the different, more expensive material that they were going to ask them to process, right?
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. So the there's certain characteristics to oil-based plastic, and one of them is like very high temperatures and resistance to that very high temperatures, right? Cellulose and biomaterial tends to not have that kind of resistance. So you need a machine that's capable of working that plastic at much lower temperatures. That's not something that today's equipment can do. So you need to make new equipment. But the problem, again, is that they are not in the market for new equipment. They're not going to buy
No.
it from you. And
Right.
then the third thing is, and this is sort of a corollary to the second one: if you've never set foot inside a factory, don't start one, for Christ's sake. Don't have that kind of ego. Don't have that kind of ego. And seriously, if you go to business school, you understand how businesses work. You don't understand how to operate one. And my apologies to the business majors. Some of you probably worked in a real work setting where you had to, put on PPE and safety helmets and then go into a factory, but most of you haven't, right? And most bioplastics founders haven't. They are either chemists or MBAs, right?
Yeah.
They don't know what it takes to run a factory. They don't know about fire safety, worker safety, chemical safety. Like there's so much that goes into it just to not injure your workers,
But
much
they don't
less.
understand that plastics are very, very hot and they're sticky. So when it explodes and gets on somebody, it is a really bad, bad situation.
It is the closest cousin to napalm that you'll see.
Yeah.
The only thing that's different is that you're not actively on fire while it's melting through your skin, right?
Right.
So it's
Right.
awful stuff. And this is why we're trying to replace it. But so let's put those three rules back together. Let's recap them real quick. Don't come with something that's more expensive. Don't come with a new machine requirement. And don't start a factory if you don't know what you're doing. So, with those things, that makes the vast majority, if not all, bioplastics companies that are in the world today non viable. So, he said, what can we do to turn that around? And what we said was like, okay, we clearly need to figure out a way to get materials into this soup of plastic making stuff that are cheaper than the material we're using today in order to create new margins and in order to win on price, right?
Mm, mm,
That's the key thing is you've got to win on price in a
mhm,
commodities market. So
mhm.
what we did was we searched for materials that would reinforce the plastic while being less expensive than the plastic itself. And what we came up with was natural fiber. Natural fiber can be in any form, but what we target is invasive species and waste, right? So from the agricultural industry, we source, uh, rice hulls and wheat chaff and corn
Mm,
husk. Right from the
mm.
furniture industry, we take sawdust. From the planting industry, like in Asia, we take rotational crops like jute. Right, and so what I'm trying to say is that we've built a platform that has enabled the use of a wide range of waste or unwanted cellulose fibers. And waste or unwanted, the reason that's so important is because it makes it cheaper. In some cases, like invasive species, people will pay us to take away our own inputs, right? Like if we go clean up a riverbank filled with invasive plants, a government is going to pay us to do that, and then we get to use that as mass in our plastic, right? So and then the second piece
Wow.
is we had to build this tech around the machines that the plastic industry uses today. And then lastly, we needed to incentivize the companies that make plastic today to make our plastic because, again, we're never going to start a facility. So, what we did was we took the cheap material, we realized that that was going to create a great deal of margin. We decided to split that margin with the makers of plastic. So, we created this new margin, then we give it away so that they will adopt and they will
Mm,
adopt in the machines that they already have. So essentially,
mhm,
the plastic industry has a million reasons to say no to switching to a different plastic. And most of these are practical reasons, right? They're not
mhm.
evil people. Like I think
No.
a lot of the time us sustainability people make the mistake of calling out other human beings for their evilness and their evil choices. But the reality is there's a system that we live in and it works in a certain way. And you need to get on board with that, right? And not that you have to agree with the system, but if you're trying to start a company that works within the system, you must understand and obey the rules of the system. And further, the employees for each of these. I mean, look, I've talked to hundreds of employees from like Shell and Exxon and a lot of the big, chemical companies. They're already embarrassed, man. You don't have to tell them, right? But what they want and the reason they say no is because it's impractical under the current system. So you have to make it practical, and most importantly, you have to take away the reasons to say no. No, you don't have to switch your equipment. No, you don't have to pay more. No, you're not going to change your processes. No, you don't have to retrain your staff. Just adopt this and make more money. That's the way to win in this market. That's what we
Yes.
do.
That is fantastic. So it's a drop-in additive to plastics. Is
You've
that
nailed
what
it.
it is?
Yeah,
Is it
exactly.
is it is it is it exclusively that, or can you make plastic by itself 100% with this product, or
You
is it
can.
always an additive right now?
Yeah, it's always going to be an additive, and the reason
Gotcha.
is this has to do with production methods,
Which is
right? So,
fantastic. I just wanted to know. Yeah.
well,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah. So and I do want to explain this choice here because it is a bit of a choice. There's a bunch of different methods of manufacture. There's compression molding, there's rotomolding, there's blow molding, there's injection molding, there's 3D printing. The one that dominates all the other ones in volume is injection molding. That's how the majority of things on Earth are made, right?
Yeah.
Now you can do a fully bio or like a fully fiber plastic, but it's not really a plastic. It's a compression molded thing. Now, when you compress something, you're not creating a lot of shear strength. So if something pulls down on one part and pushes up on the other, a compression molded object is just going to shatter. It's going to break in half, right?
Mm.
So that's the problem, is that it's not strong enough to just use fiber. So you need something to kind of glue the fibers together. And in this case, it's going to be polymer. Now we've gotten up to 85% fiber fill, which once it's done, it looks like a compression molded object, but it's literally 3 times as strong because it also has plastic in there. Now, let's talk about the plastic itself, right? So we have choices, right? There's virgin olefins. That's what we're trying to get away from as a planet, right? There's recycled olefins, which we want to use, but the infrastructure for recycled plastic blows. I don't know a nicer way to say it. And
Yeah. Sucks, is non existent, completely inefficient,
sure, yeah,
piece of shit. What? Yeah.
couldn't
Whatever.
possibly be profitable under the current economic situation
Yeah.
is my favorite of those,
Yeah.
because the amount of sorting and chemical and physical sorting that you have to do there is not profitable. The product that comes out is worth 30 cents a pound, and it costs $5 a pound to process it. How the hell are you supposed to make a profit doing that? And my point here is that recycling should not be a private industry. Recycling should be like the mail. It should be like the US Postal Service. It's something that we should lose money on as a government constantly in order to provide a critical service for the world, right? And for our communities. But that's socialism. So we
Well,
don't.
I don't know if that's socialism or not. I think it's just the right thing to do. I think, in certain aspects, I think that ideation should be applied, right? And in others, maybe not so much. But I always thought that it made no sense why, garbage collection is just paid for by the tax and, relatively free, I guess. But if you want to recycle something, it's an upcharge. Should be the opposite, shouldn't it?
It should be. Exactly. You
Shouldn't it
should.
cost you more to just throw something away than to recycle it?
Exactly. And I think you'll see that, the tough thing is consumer behavior, right? Like you can have the most brilliant recycling program in the world, but once consumers get their grubby little mitts on your product, the chances are about 80% that they're going to throw it in the wrong bin. Or they're
Yeah,
going to
of
put it in the
course.
bin dirty, or they're going to
Yeah.
mix it with other materials, or they're going to do this or that, or the other. There's 18 different things they can do to make the plastic unusable, and they tend to do all of them.
But you know what? Industry does that as well. I was
They
at a
do.
plastics recycling show. Well, it was a plastics show. They had a recycling portion of it. But, standing up there, the sustainability officer for a global food manufacturer said, yeah, we get it. If we just had gray or black packaging, foils could be completely, recyclable. But we're going to make them shiny and put our colors on them and stuff like that. It's just the way it is. So,
Right.
suck it up.
Because we got to
Like,
advertise.
yeah, because we got to advertise.
Right. And then nobody wants the black plastic that results from that behavior.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
That's the biggest problem there.
That's the problem. You can't get rid of that. Yeah.
Exactly. So what we've done is develop a system that enables the use of virgin olefins. That was the first thing we tried, just to see if it was workable to do what we had imagined, right? And then the second thing we did was recycled polymer. Right. We said, okay, now let's take the crappy stuff, the black stuff that no one wants to use, not only because it's black, but also because it's weak in mechanical properties. And we're going to reinforce it with our cellulose fibers. And what we've created, and if you look behind me, I don't know if this is going to be on video or just an audio interview, but
It is.
there's a big black square sitting behind me, and
Oh, is that a pallet?
that is a shipping pallet that's 100% made out of agricultural waste and recycled plastic. It holds 1,800 pounds with low quality recycled plastic because we've reinforced it with our fibers. Now, the next
So
step.
you can take like the garbage plastic, because you and I talk about this before. Everybody wants, I want to buy this because it's made out of ocean plastic. But what they don't realize is that ocean plastic is literally garbage.
Right.
It's a garbage plastic. You can't make anything out of 100% ocean plastics except a landfill.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. Exactly. So that's another problem that we're trying to solve is look, no, there's relatively little recycled plastic, but the reason there's so little is because it's not profitable to use and it doesn't have the material properties that companies are looking for. We've managed to upgrade it to the point where the US federal government is now buying those pallets to ship ammunition, food, and medicine to hotspots in the world that need help. Right. And that is the power of this platform. And
And
last,
they're reusable, and are they recyclable themselves?
they
How is
are.
your material as far as it's comparable to virgin plastic being able to be then recycled and used again?
It needs to be recycled with itself. Otherwise, the cellulose in a standard recycling setup is going to be seen as a contaminant, and it's going to ruin the plastic.
Yeah,
There,
yeah, no, right. So you got to recycle it as if you would do PET and HD in separate lines, right?
Correct. Yes. And
Gotcha.
so with when you do that, it recycles perfectly. We've
Yeah,
tested
yeah,
it.
yeah.
We've tested the same sample being used and recycled 4 times, and it retains the material properties. It starts to lose them on the fifth time. But durable virgin olefin plastic can be recycled exactly 5 times before it starts to lose
Yeah,
its material
yeah.
properties.
Everything starts to lose its integrity after
Exactly.
a while, anyway.
So
Yeah,
we're about 20% worse, but the reality is that 95% of durable plastic isn't recycled. So 95% of our plastic is going to end up in the landfill. And that's where we really shine because we have such a high fiber content in there, that stuff is carbon negative and it's bio based. As soon as enough weathering exposes some of the cellulose fibers, they begin to rot. And that creates more surface area for the plastic to break apart, get more water down in there, and to continue biodegrading the biodegradable parts of it. So, yes, there's still microplastics left over, but there's 50 to 85% less microplastics left over when you use our plastic rather than
yeah,
normal.
and that's another in the industry of just recycling in general, no matter if it's plastics or not. A step forward is a step forward, people.
Right. Right. You know, we
Okay,
have we have
and just
trouble
because
getting
somebody
investors.
didn't reach their goal doesn't mean they were a failure. It means they they reached part of their goal. Right?
Yeah. And
These
we
are
do have
things that
trouble.
drive me crazy.
We have trouble with ESG investors and stuff. They're like, well, there's still plastic in your plastic. We're not going to invest. And I'm like, you don't understand how sticky of a problem this is. And we've made huge strides towards eliminating
Yeah,
the problem. The other bit is we have fully eliminated the problem now. We've done some experiments with PLA, fully bio-based plastic. We've added biofiber in to make it even more sustainable than it was before and cheaper than it was before. And that's done. We now have a bio composite, right? It's not ready for commercial scale or sale yet. We're still doing some characterization work, other things like that on it, but it's there. We have now solved the problem that the ESG investors always have with us, which is we now offer, or we're about to offer, bio plastic that can replace completely durable olefin plastic.
so is your plastic able to go into an FDA L&O operation and pass that muster? Do you know that yet?
So we've been passed for food safety, but when it comes to like implants or anything that's going to go inside your body, you don't want any biomaterial in that ever. There's no good way to do that in my
Okay,
opinion.
but for like a food container,
Oh yeah,
plastics, that type
totally
of stuff,
fine.
it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. We already
Gotcha.
make plates and snack bowls and other things like that. We're fully
Okay.
cleared to do. Yeah. So that's the other thing is we're not using any like poisonous chemicals to bond the polymer and the cellulose. That's just I like sleeping at night and I don't want to be
Yeah.
leaching chemicals into anywhere.
I like
So
sleeping during the day every once in a while myself too.
me too. But
Pretty
if I'm
nice.
worried about the people I poisoned, I'm not going to get either one. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
yeah, so that's the thing is like we use highly vetted, already on the market chemicals in order to achieve the reaction that we want to achieve between the two grades of plastic, and that's the
Yeah.
end of the story there. Now I'll get to the other product that we make real quick, so we can move on to
Right
the
on. Let's do it. What
storage.
is it?
So what we make is a biocomposite cladding, or it can be used just as a roof or a wall itself. It's thermoset resin, which can be bio-based, recycled, or actually no, I'm sorry, bio-based or virgin. There is no recycled thermoset plastic because it's set once it's had the exothermic reaction, you can't melt it back down, right? So. One day we hope to solve that, but we're not anywhere near there yet.
Yeah, you can't uncook an egg, right? It's called
Exactly.
entropy.
Exactly.
It's one
Exactly.
of those pesky laws of thermodynamics
Right,
that keep
you
popping up,
can't
right?
fix that. Yeah. Anyways, so what it is essentially it's a housing system. This is how the company started. We'll get into the origin story in a minute, but essentially, this plating can be made by hand in situ in a disaster zone using only cellulose that's at hand and a barrel of resin, plus our bonding chemical, which is a spray. It's like literally you could put it in a hair washing
Whoa,
bottle.
whoa, 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 whoa! Wait a minute. This is cool.
Yeah. So
Explain a little more.
yeah, yeah. So essentially, what we're doing is very similar to what we're doing in the main product line, which is reinforcing other plastics using fibers as a plant fibers as a reinforcement. So we use either woven or chopped waste, and we put it into a mold. We spray the woven or chopped agricultural waste with our proprietary bonding chemical, and then we paint resin over the top or pour resin over the top. Doesn't really matter. You close up the mold. You wait for the exothermic reaction to occur with the thermoset resin. That takes about an hour, and then you want to leave it out for another couple hours to finish off gassing, and then you've got a wall. Right in about 3 hours, you have a wall. Now, this wall, I'll give you the experimental results over the last few years. We've been doing this for 5 years. We have built multiple villages in the world's largest refugee camp, moved refugees from their tents into these homes. We found in a study that was done with the supervision of the United Nations that our homes reduced infectious disease by 80% and in-home sexual assault by 100%, and that's both over 2 years.
Wait. By just because they're in a solid structure
Correct.
versus like a tent type of thing,
Yes.
right? It's
Yeah.
not. There's not a chemical property that just says, you know what? I don't think I'm going to sexual assault anybody
Yeah,
today.
exactly. Yeah, no,
Okay.
actually, the funny part is, and the sad part is that the sexual assault statistic comes from the fact that we gave them a locking door. That's not made out of
Yeah. Yeah.
bioplastics.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's so simple.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the sad part is like you've got like 2 million people in this refugee camp. Not every person is a good person, and they're really bored with nothing better to do. And there's an epidemic of sexual assault in refugee camps. So by providing
Yeah.
these low cost homes that are durable, that are dignified, that are made out of local agricultural waste, and we'll get to why that's important in a second. You keep people safer from pests, whether those be human pests or rats and mosquitoes, right? In
Or like
addition,
lions and tigers and bears.
yeah, exactly. I mean, unlikely in a refugee camp, but any of the above is going to have a hard time getting through 3 millimeter
Yeah.
reinforced plastic. We've also found in some early testing that this stuff is shrapnel proof up to at least 500 meters per second. So we're talking with the DoD about creating, both refugee shelters and HABs for our soldiers, where we've got this big drone problem, right? Explosive drones. We think that by putting a reinforced inexpensive material into these situations, we can help save lives. And the most important part here to me is the economics of it, right? You can buy tin, but if it rains on your tin, it's going to corrode. Our stuff has survived 2 hurricanes over the last 4 years, and not even been moved an inch, not been knocked over. Everything else around it got flattened, but this stuff is dense. It's heavy. It doesn't want to be moved. Right. So after surviving two hurricanes, we actually got covered by Fast Company and EcoWatch for that particular feat. But yeah, this stuff. The thing that I find important about the economics is that we're buying the locals' agricultural waste. And let me point something out: we don't dump refugees in Bill Gates' backyard. Right? As generous as he doesn't have to host refugees on his property. Who do we dump them on? Other poor people, right? And that creates friction, right? Because these people are already struggling, and then you dump a bunch of refugees in their fields that they use for their income. What do you think is going to happen there? Violence is the answer, and it happens all the time. There was one guy on Mykonos, or not Mykonos, a different Greek island, who burned down 1,300 refugee shelters because they'd reduced tourism to his little island, right? And I don't blame the guy, right? Like, I mean, yeah, it was a monstrous thing to do, but like they destroyed his livelihood,
Well,
right?
his attitude, you can't blame his attitude, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I blame
Yeah.
the actions, but not the attitude. They
Yeah.
destroyed
Yeah.
his livelihood. They prevented him from sending his kids to school. Wouldn't you be angry? But what
A
if,
bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
but what if instead we came to him and said, hey, can we buy your crops? We're going to use them to house these people. We're going to make you money with this system and house the people. And guess what? If you're super poor and you're living in Bangladesh and you're like a farmer and you're probably living in a tin shack, we'll build you a house too. How about that? We'll buy your crops, we'll build you a house, and we'll use the remainder to house these refugees. That's the power of the system. Now, the reason we don't really talk about this is something that is close and philosophical to me, which is I came up Jewish. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I have really loved big swaths of Jewish philosophy, and one of them is the idea of the mitzvah or the good deed, right? And the Talmud, actually, one of our holy books, ranks mitzvahs. Let me give you an example of the worst mitzvah. Bud Light.
Wait, there's a worst good deed?
Yeah, there is,
Okay.
and I'll demonstrate. So when hurricane, I forget which hurricane it was, but some hurricane hit Houston, and Anheuser Busch spent about $50 million bringing fresh water to the citizens of Houston so they wouldn't dehydrate. Really awesome act of charity. But then they turned around and spent $100 million advertising that fact.
Yeah.
That's the worst mitzvah, the one that you blare out into the world. Look how great I am. Look how charitable I am. Isn't that amazing? For Jews, our goodness is supposed to be between us and God, right? Now, and again, not being super religious, I still think that being a little demure about the things that you donate and the things that you do to help other people is the right thing. You shouldn't be like,
The,
look
the
at
motivation isn't for personal gain, right?
exactly.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Well, actually, let's dig into that for a second because I think that all altruism is fundamentally selfish.
Listen, I had that argument in college in philosophy, and I eventually won it. It took me about a month with my philosophy professor, but I contended that all being selfish is actually a good thing, and being greedy is actually a good thing, and it is impossible for a human being to not be selfish, even in good deeds.
It goes
Uh,
against our
yeah,
fundamental
yeah.
programming.
It's not possible to do it. It's
So
it's
I
just
do
not.
good things because it makes me feel good, not because
Yeah,
I need the pat on the back attaboy from you or anyone else, right?
that's
And
right.
so
That's still selfish, and it's not necessarily a bad motivator when in the right place. Yeah.
that's exactly right. So that's why we don't talk about the housing that much. I'm a little embarrassed, in terms of talking about all the
Yeah, but you need to, because you got to evangelize, taking from the religious side of things. You got to evangelize what you're doing to bring that movement. I mean, I'm a Christian, and I've had plenty of Jewish friends, and both of us agree that our job here is to spread that good word and to bring others to the faith and do good for others. Otherwise, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right? The what is it? The cost of discipleship, right? You don't get to be to just sit there and be good.
right.
You have to do it to other people, right?
And by the way, that is why I am here, right? It took a couple years ago, my co-founder twisted my arm into starting to do podcasts with folks so we could talk in a long format about what we do. And I was just like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to like pat myself on the back on air. I hate that shit. And he was just like, you got to evangelize, man. Otherwise you can't be the CEO. So I was just like, all right, fine, I'll do the podcasts. And I've started enjoying them, but
Well, it's fantastic. I'm glad you're doing it, because you're doing a fantastic job of telling the story.
well, thank
And
you.
I'm glad you're bringing up this thing. This is does can you extract the cellulose to produce this housing material from organic waste? I mean, that's one of the biggest problems by volume, and really VOCs and other emissions, leachate, et cetera, that we have as a
Yes.
society, is that organic municipal waste.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. And I don't know about locally, but in places where the economy is substantially simpler, like developing economies, rural parts of developing
More
economies.
agricultural,
Yeah, exactly. So
agrarian.
so
Yeah.
we're forming this partnership, and we're hoping that this will kick off next year. But essentially, going in with two other startups, one of which makes methane gas for power from human feces, animal feces, and food waste. There's another one that's a bioethanol producer that uses the parts of the plants that we don't use, that makes cooking fuel for the same community. So we're going to co-locate all three companies in one facility. We're going to take the stuff they don't use and make houses with it. They're going to take the stuff we don't use, make cooking fuel and power fuel out of it.
Ah,
Right. So
fantastic.
maybe one day we'll be able to bring this to the municipalities here in the United States and Europe. But today, and it's it we always get slapped on the wrist for pointing this out, but the West has done a lot in terms of decarbonizing, and there are areas that are still growing, and they're growing their populations rapidly, and they're consuming coal-based power and other things like that. And they are, we are still the biggest polluters. Let's not get, don't get me twisted here, but these populations that are coming up and increasing their commercial need are also becoming very large contributors. So if we can stave that off by giving them dignified solutions, not, I mean, look, I mean, no shame to the person who started this company, but there's a company out there that compresses trash into bricks for houses. Now that's really cool tech, but think about this. How do you feel about yourself if you live in a house made of trash, right? And don't answer the question. I'm just saying, like that's not dignified to me. And this is, right? Something that looks like a house, not a pile of trash, is important to the human psyche, right? And so that's why we're doing it
I
this
think it certainly expands the customer base for sure.
definitely. Definitely
Yeah.
that
I
too.
mean, I can see in some parts of, like Washington, Oregon, California, where they'd be very proud that they built a house out of trash,
That's
right?
true. That's
But
absolutely
but there's a certain uh, you know type
that's a
of person
choice
that's
if you live in the United States. If you live in the United States, you're one of the most privileged people on earth, right? But when
amen. That's true,
I'm really
100%.
talking about the people who, still literacy rate is like 20%, right? In 2024. That kind of person deserves dignity too, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and and I love what you're doing because one of the things that I contend and try to convince as much as possible is that our move towards, or the growing move towards, sustainability and recycling, et cetera. Like you pointed out, bioplastic has been around for 34 years, but things are starting to really gain strength.
Right.
Is within all this, there's tremendous opportunities, and one of those is to equalize the playing field of the haves and have-nots by
Damn
bringing
straight.
up the have-nots, not
Damn
by
straight.
reducing, but bringing them up. We have plenty of opportunities, and it's fantastic, if you ask me.
And
I,
that's
I
it.
think it's quite a
That's really,
blessing that we're actually in this situation if
I
we
agree.
utilize it the right way.
I agree. And, there's two things I want to say on that. The first one is that is why we try to source our fiber from smallholders first before going to the big corporate farms and stuff like that.
Mm, mhm, mhm,
Is
mhm.
is we want to democratize polymer production because it's been held in the hands of the owners and investors in Exxon Corporation and its ilk for all time, essentially. So let's take a little bit of that. They can afford it. I promise you, they can afford losing a little bit of revenue to the little farmer who just wants to send his kids to school, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's help those people. And the other thing, I have completely forgotten what I was going to say. So let's move on.
Okay. I love what you're doing. This Just one last thing on this housing, the product that you're making out of the housing. Are you utilizing recycled polymers in that bio to
We can't.
produce this?
Not yet, and that's the thing we were talking about with the thermosets, right? Is like it needs to, if it can be made in situ, it needs to not need specialized equipment, right? This stuff can be made by hand in a mold, right? And that's the only equipment that you need is hands and molds, right? So if you're going to stick with that, you have to use thermoset resins. Now, if we wanted to extrude these using equipment, we could absolutely use recycled plastic, but that's not our goal right now. In these far flung places, it's so uneconomical to bring over plastic making equipment, right? Like just for example, the world's largest refugee camp is in Chittagong, Bangladesh. It is on the coast. It is a rural town. It's got like a hotel, one. And it's the longest sea beach in the world. So it's like a little tourist destination. Where are you going to fit a plastic manufacturing plant in there? You
Yeah.
just can't. You can't. There's no way to do that. So what we're doing is kind of trying to work with the reality, and I hope that's coming through kind of in general. Is that I love pie in the sky ideas, but I'm a pragmatist. I want my stuff to work for people, right? And in order to work for people, it's got to work. Just table stakes is it has to function, and so we do things that are as sustainable as possible while also realizing the reality of the situation that we in the world are in, and so we have to think about things that way as well.
Very interesting. So let's talk a bit about your path to where you are right now?
Yeah. So, I want everybody to keep in mind as we're talking through this that everything from the Visa paycheck to today occurred in the last 6 years. So we'll get there. So I'm from Houston originally. Like I said, I grew up next to the Space Center as a kid. And, I ended up going to the University of Texas at Austin. I wanted to go into pre med. And the reason I wanted that, and this is really a driving factor for a lot about me, is that both my parents are physicians and not just physicians. My father's a neuroimmunologist. There's not very many of them in the world, like sub 50 doctors who have his exact specialty. And he deals with some of the worst diseases, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, things like that. And sometimes he makes real progress on people's disease for that, which is, largely seen as a death sentence, both of those diseases. And to be able to live an extra 20 years, happy and not in too much pain, that's what my dad does for people. And my
That's
mother,
amazing.
my mother has the most depressing medical specialty in the world. And I want you to take a guess.
The most depressing?
Yeah.
I
What's the,
dude, I have no idea.
all right. So, Michael, this is the most depressing specialty in medicine: pediatric palliative care. That is children who are terminally ill, and how do you help them and their families through their end of life? That's what my mother does. She started the first hospice in the world for children specifically. It's called the Butterfly Room, and it's in Galveston, Texas. So you know, kids die too. And it's really hard to think about that and admit that. But instead of, treating them until the absolute moment of death, which can be highly invasive, not very dignified, painful and expensive for the family, she helps them die in as little pain as possible with as much dignity as possible in a way that is acceptable to the parents and family. And so that is what made me want to be a doctor. Is that my parents walked out of school and started helping people in really fundamental, important ways, and I wanted to have that kind of impact on the world too. So I got to UT and I realized I hate and suck at biology. Kind of a problem for my plans. Um, so that wasn't great. So I dropped out because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and I didn't want to acquire a bunch of debt sitting there in college not knowing what to study. So I dropped out in 2009, which was a wonderful financial move given that there's global financial recession. I ended up homeless. I lived under I-35 bridge for about 3 months until I was able to find a job at a pyramid scheme selling windshield repairs on the side of the road in Texas heat in the summer. I got
Not Safe Light. Safe Light. You're not saying Safe Light is a pyramid scheme.
no. There's another company called
Just kidding.
Yeah, no. So there's a company called Chipio that started a couple years before the recession, takes advantage of people who are really struggling to get a job. You get paid $0 per hour. You get no sort of salary or any sort of base, but you do get $20 a chip that you repair. So you stand out there for 10 hours a day, and you pitch people while they're filling up their tank at the gas station on fixing the rock damage that's on their windshields. You got to get them to get out their insurance card, let you call their insurance company, and also make the repair while they're sitting there filling up their tank. It's a
And I thought like just washing the windshield as a homeless person was a tough gig.
Right, right. I gotta get you to, so basically a good day is you close 5 people, you make $100 for standing
Yeah.
out in the sun at 105-degree heat in Texas in patent leather dress shoes, and washing people's windshields to find the damage as well, which you're not allowed to accept tips for. So all
Oh
of that
wow.
was, yeah. So and of course your manager and his manager and the guys all the way up the chain make way more money than you do on each repair. It's a $80 repair that the insurance company pays for. You get $20. So that's why it was a pyramid scheme. Anyways, turns out I'm really fucking good at sales. So
Nice.
I crushed it at that job and said, man, this sucks. I'd like to, sell something that's more expensive, maybe get a base salary, right? So I went back to school, and I went back to school for rhetoric, thinking, there's two ways this can go. Rhetoric is the art of persuasion, right? So I was just like, look, I want to run for politics because I think local politics are the best way to affect your community in a positive way. And if I fail, I'll go into sales because I can make a decent amount of money doing that. So, as you might imagine, I failed. Otherwise, you'd be calling me councilman, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. I did run for city council in Austin on a platform of improving traffic and reducing over policing of minorities. I did not take money from the corporates, and that is why I lost. I was badly out fundraised by my opponent, and so I was in sales while I was doing that, and I stayed in sales after the fact. So I worked for a number of wonderful startups. I also worked for Amazon, Oracle. I worked for WP Engine, which has a building up on 4th Street in Austin. And then finally, Thousand Eyes, which was an excellent enterprise network monitoring solution that I was really great at selling. I loved that software. And, they got acquired by Cisco for a couple $1 billion about 3 years ago, which gave me a nice little cash bump for Applied Bioplastics. But
Sweet.
anyways, the story really begins here in 2017 at Thousand Eyes. In February, the first 2 weeks of the fiscal year, I closed Visa on a massive account, and this was really lucky because I had the director of networks for Visa on the demo, and we caught a live outage while I was talking to him with our software. And we're able to get to
Oh,
root cause in 2 minutes when he told us that his DevOps team would have taken an hour. We saved them $10 million on the demo. And they
wow.
bought everything. Right now,
How
again,
fortuitous.
yeah, exactly. And again, I'm not like a religious person, but if I was, I'd be like, that's divine intervention right there, because that changed my life. They bought everything, and not only did they buy everything, they bought everything in the first 2 weeks of the year. And if you've ever been in sales, you know that you get accelerators after you've hit your annual quota, where you get paid
Sure.
double or triple commission for, as a thank you for beating your annual quota. You're not supposed to beat your annual quota in the first 2 weeks of the year and then get accelerators for the rest of the year. But that's exactly what happened to me. I ended up making $1.5 million in commissions alone in 2017.
Wow. Sweet.
But at this time, I only knew I had $500,000 from that one deal. And I said to myself, man, you've been striving and trying to make a difference your entire life. Now you're 27, you're debt free, and somebody just handed you $500,000. If there was a neon sign blinking over my head saying, now is your moment, it wouldn't have
Yeah.
been any more obvious than it was at that
Yeah.
point. So I said, all right, here's what I want to do. I want to donate 100% of that money to charity. I'm going to put my own net worth back to zero because I believe in myself and I believe in my accelerators for the rest of the year. And I'm going to go do something important with this money. So the first thing I did was I set up a political action committee called Protecting Texas Families from Preventable Violence, which offered a middle of the road compromise on gun control, which is essentially, look, 2/3 of all gun sales in Texas are private to private individual. There is no way, there's no mechanism by which you can figure out if the person that you're selling your gun to is a criminal. We should fix that and only that. So it was essentially a free 5 minute, anonymous and optional, so it doesn't conflict with the Second Amendment, background check that you could run on the buyer of your gun. You would put into a government website your email address and their driver's license number, and all you would get in response is a federally eligible or federally ineligible, thumbs up or thumbs down. You don't get their whole criminal history. That's a violation of their privacy, right? But if they're
Yeah.
a dishonorable discharge, if they're a domestic violence, abuser, if they're, they've got mental health red flags, that'll pop up and say, hey, you shouldn't sell the gun to this person, right? So it would vastly increase public safety without offending or getting over top of the Second Amendment. I got, Republican Senator Seliger. Now I'm a Democrat. I'm a Texas Democrat, which makes me a Republican most any other place. But
Yeah. Sure does.
regardless, I'm able to talk to anyone in the world, regardless of what their background is, and I convinced 100 elected Republicans to support that bill. Now the NRA killed it anyways because they don't want any legislation, regardless of if it's reasonable or not. But we're still working on it, and the NRA is going bankrupt. So one day this will come together. The next
Yeah.
thing
The NRA is scared of the slippery slopes. Is what?
Exactly. Of course, when there's no slippery slope there, as I mentioned, but
No. No.
but any movement is scary to them. So, anyways, that failed, but again, still working on it in the background. The next thing I did was I said, look, social media is dangerous for people. So I wrote a bill that essentially calls the social media algorithm that's addictive a drug. Which it is, because it releases dopamine in your brain when you get angry, when you get sad, when you become enraged by content you see on there. And it's designed to keep you on the site by making you angry so you'll scroll more, right? And I think that should be an illegal drug, right? We need to be able to consent to that, right? Consent's the big deal. I mean, do you remember when Facebook was like puppies and kittens and pictures of your friends rather than
Yeah. Oh
like,
yeah.
angry political content? I do, and I would like that. So I started a pack called the Icarus Project, and that the social media companies have flown a little too close to the sun with this stuff, and essentially tried to reclassify social media as a drug. Recently, about three or 4 months ago, the state of New York passed a version of my bill that they called the Safe for Kids Act, which didn't go as far as I wanted, but classified social media as a drug for children and prevented anybody under 14 from being served that heinous, addictive content without their own permission. So that was the first bill
Wow.
I've ever gotten passed, and really really proud of that one. And then the next thing that happened was a buddy of mine from college. He's sadly passed away since then. His name was TJ Farazi, and he said to me, Alex, I know you're looking to do charitable stuff. I know you got a little money left over after you started those packs. Something really terrible is happening in my home country, and I wondered if you might want to go over there with me to address it. And I said, well, what's going on? He said, well, I don't really know, but 2 million refugees are trying to cross the border into my country. I think they're fleeing something really bad. And I was just like, well, fuck it. Let's go do something about it. So we flew to Bangladesh. I took a month off work, and we walked into the Rohingya genocide. That's what it was. And the reason
Holy
neither of
crap.
us knew what it was because no one in the West had picked up the story until like 2019, right?
Yeah.
And this started in 2017, which,
Yeah.
a criminal failure of the media there. I mean, I don't like to bash on the media too much, but this one, what is it that they're on the wrong hemisphere of the planet? Are they too brown for you? Do they believe in the wrong religion? Like, why didn't they get covered? And this is personally offensive as a
Because there's no international threat to the United States.
exactly.
It's yeah.
But it's human beings
Sadly.
being slaughtered. It's children being slaughtered. Isn't that
Yeah.
newsworthy? I thought blood and guts lead, right? So why didn't you cover
Yeah.
this? And as a Jew, it's extremely offensive because the world promised us in 1945 never again, and we've failed that promise over and over and over.
Oh
And
gosh. Yeah.
and in the,
Yeah.
the age of the cell phone, you can't manage to cover what's all being blared across social media by the people who's being killed. They're begging for help. You can't cover that. Anyways, my anger at this situation aside, I decided to go do something about it. So we walk into the Rohingya genocide. I was the first American that I know of with boots on the ground. I beat Angelina Jolie by 9 months. She's usually the first in every one of these crises. And I started thinking about what can I actually do to help these people? Because I got about $250,000 left. What can I actually do for 2 million people with $250,000? Can't walk around and hand everybody a nickel and say good luck. That doesn't help anyone.
No, it doesn't do
So
anything.
so what do I do with this money? And I decided I need to be a force multiplier for myself, for my own money. I need to get other people to care about this stuff. So I'm going to film a documentary. So I hired a crew, got a director, and we started filming in the world's largest refugee camp. And when we finished filming in the world's largest refugee camp, interviews, footage of people crossing the border, carrying their children on their heads because there's a big river that they have to walk through. We said, look, this isn't compelling enough. We need more evidence. So, and I can't talk about the method, but I got cameras into Myanmar illegally, and we filmed in the killing fields of Myanmar directly, uh,
Wow.
and we got what we came for. We got the evidence. We caught a Burmese unit burning down a village in a government marked APC, armored personnel carrier. We caught them. And they were claiming at the time that they weren't genociding these people, that they had burned down their own homes and ran away, as you do, right? Like that's called spring cleaning, right?
Yeah,
But
of course.
but yeah,
Yeah.
so that monstrous lie that they were telling, we put the lie to that, and then we submitted our evidence to the International Criminal Court of Justice at The Hague, and we submitted our evidence to one of my personal heroes, Senator John McCain, when he was still alive, and he turned around and he wrote the Burma Human Rights and Freedom Act, which was a package of sanctions on Myanmar. Our evidence was used at the International Criminal Court of Justice at The Hague as well, to hold the leaders of Myanmar accountable. In fact, one of my favorite moments of my life is when one of the leaders of Myanmar called my footage fake news because it was so damning to their claims. And I'm sure you know where they picked that up from.
Yeah.
But anyways, so all of that occurred, and while I was there, I was trying to raise money for the film because I'd run out. And I ended up taking $250,000 loan, which I'm still paying off to finish the film. But it was just too important not to jeopardize my own.
Is it finished now? Is the
Oh
film
yeah,
out?
oh yeah, it's been.
What is it called?
It's called Blossoms from Ash, and it's on Amazon Prime and Apple TV. So if you guys go and see it, I thank you in advance for the 25 cents I get off your $3.50 rental.
That's
You
all
know,
you get?
there's a lot of other people getting paid in that chain, man. There's this distributor, there's Amazon itself. Like, I get nothing. I think in the last 3 years since the film's been online, I've made about $700 on it, and I spent about $500,000 that I'm still paying off on that film. But anyways, I was trying to raise money for the film. Really fun anecdote based on that title there. I'm trying to make it a little memorable for you. My director and I got into a little disagreement mid filming, and I wanted to make a change, and he didn't want to make the change. And he said, "Alex, we're filming Blossoms from Ash, not Blossoms from Ass." Anyways, so long story short, we get the movie done. I am looking for support in Bangladesh from some of the wealthy of Bangladesh, saying, "Look, your country's done something really noble here. Here, where I'm from in America, we bitch and moan and complain when 3,000 people want to cross the border. You took in 2 million people and then fed them and housed them for at this point 5 years, right? So like." You should be proud of this. You should help me advertise this, put some money into the film. So I failed at that. I thought that was a pretty compelling pitch. They didn't. But there was another person at that dinner, and his name was Dr. Mubarak Ahmed Khan. And Khan was a former nuclear physicist for Bangladesh. He set up their very first nuclear reactor in Bangladesh for power, and had retired about 20 years prior to work on his real passions. He got a government pension and a government lab provided to him just because he was so smart and had made so many advancements for them. And so what he wanted to work on was fiber-based plastics. And I hope
Oh
this is
wow.
starting to sound a little familiar. He
Yeah.
developed the housing system. He's the one who invented that, right? And so he invited me to his laboratory when we met him. Actually, recently, just this year, he earned the Independence Award, which is our the equivalent of our Presidential Medal of Freedom. Is the absolute highest honor that you can get in Bangladesh for
Oh
his
wow.
career of work there. He's been cited over 10,000 times on Google, but I didn't know any of this when I met him. So when I meet him, um, he takes me to his lab the next day. He shows me this material. He's expounding upon all of its benefits and all that kind of stuff. And I said, hang on, I got to ask you the investor question, because frankly, I'm thinking about investing in you with what little money I have left. If this is so awesome and so useful for the country that it was originated in, why isn't it everywhere? And he said, Alex, I'm a scientist, not a salesman. Kind of offended, like, right? And
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I was just like, that's funny. I'm a salesman, not a scientist. Why don't we put two and two together since you clearly need that? And
Yeah.
it took about 6 months, but we convinced him. And I went home and I told my co-founder, and who was my roommate at the time. We met on Craigslist. We've lived in this house together for the last 7 years. This was 2 years in, and I knew that he was going to start a coffee roasting business. He'd saved up $250,000, and he was going to buy a coffee roasting machine and sell coffee to the local coffee shops. And I said, hey, man, you want to do that, or you want to help me save the world? And he was just like, saving the world sounds pretty fucking cool, man. And
Yeah.
so we flew back to Bangladesh together. We acquired the tech from Dr. Khan, and we incorporated applied bioplastics to build refugee shelters. About a year later, we were introduced to Dr. Lawrence Derzal, the Lifetime Achievement Award winner in biocomposites, who pointed out that what Dr. Khan had invented, the bonding chemical that he had invented, was not just useful in its original context, that it could be applied to other types of other parts of the plastic industry. And if we decided to try to make it commercializable for injection molding, that we could clean up one of the dirtiest industries on the planet together. And so we said, fuck yeah, Dr. Drizal, come on board, be an advisor. We used his and Dr. Khan's name to hire a bunch of other scientists. The majority of the people who work for me are PhDs or masters, like way, way more educated than me. And the only reason I still have a role at this company is because not one of those people can sell a story to save their life, right? They're really smart
Yeah.
scientists, but they suck at pitching. So what I am as the CEO here is I am now the chief storyteller of this amazing group of scientists that has created this transformative plastic and plastic platform for the world.
It is absolutely fantastic, dude. The story is amazing, man.
Well, let me
I can't imagine. I mean, holy cow. bro.
Well, let me add a little cherry on top, and I think
Yeah.
this is, it's a sadder part of my story, but I want to make it clear to you and your audience that I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you this because it's changed my philosophy, and I think my philosophy is superior to yours. And I'm saying that as a general statement, and I'm trying to be funny here, but the reality is that you never know how long your life is going to be. Right? You might get into a tragic car accident at the age of 18. You might get a flesh-eating bacteria at the age of 30. You might be felled by a heart attack at 45, right? Like there's a lot of uncertainty in this world. And I think a lot of people these days live as if they're going to live to 90 as a guarantee, right? So I found out a year ago. Now I've been suffering from this for the last 4 years. In the first year that the business was operational, I had to have a hip replacement. I started falling and being in great pain in my right hip, and so I went and got it replaced. But we didn't know why. And then 2 years later, I needed the same thing done to my left hip. So I've had both of my hips replaced by the age of 32. Then I started being unable to walk. Like I was having terrible pain in my feet and my knees and my ankles. And it started to spread to my hands and shoulders. And I was like, I didn't know what was going on. So after multiple rheumatologists, I finally found this wonderful one down in Houston named Dr. Diane Wollaston, who correctly diagnosed me with severe early onset psoriatic arthritis. Now, this stuff put me in a wheelchair last year while trying to get this company off the ground. About half of the year, I was basically immobile. I have had to start chemotherapy, biologicals, and a number of other drugs and things that are very high risk to my organs just to be able to walk. So the net here, and the reason I tell this story is I'm now aware that the medicines I take to make me, be able to walk comfortably sometimes, are going to kill me by probably about 55 or 60. They're hematotoxic, which means they're toxic to my kidneys. They're toxic to my liver, and worst of all, they're toxic to my bone marrow. Right. So I'm not going to be able to replace my losses over the next few years, and I will likely die of liver failure in the next 15 to 20 years. The reason I'm telling you this story is that, I had plans, right? Just like everybody else. I had plans. I maybe wanted to start a family one day. Certainly wanted to retire, buy a home so I feel secure in the place that I live. I'm not going to live long enough to do any of those things, right? I'm giving up large swaths of the human experience. And for what? Um, and the for what is the question that I want everybody to be asking themselves now and forever is what have you done with your time? Are you proud of what you do? And if not, are you capable of change? So for me, the big thing that has changed, because I'd already started this company. I'd already been doing all my charitable work long prior to this diagnosis. What it's done is it's turned the burner under my ass up to 11 to get this stuff done in time to see it. Because remember, altruism is selfish. I want to see the effects of what I've done. I want to see the 200 million homes that I've built in the next 20 years. I want to see the plastic industry change because of something I did. I'm being selfish, but that means we got to get this done, and we got to get this done now. So it's lit a fire under me to finish the mission, right? And not just turn this into a lifestyle business where we're nibbling at the edges of the industry. We need to see change. I need to see change. And that's why I'm here on your show. So I want to tell people about what
Amen.
I'm doing.
That is fantastic. I'm not even going to ask you for a final thought because
That was a
that's the
final.
final thought. I absolutely love it. Alex, as updates happen, you and I will stay friends. I've got a lot of things that you and I can do together, I believe, throughout the world in other avenues. But telling your story and getting updates as we move forward and we do realize those changes um, will be tremendous.
Let's do it. Yeah, I'd love to
Will be
come back
tremendous.
and tell you that we've succeeded and we've changed the world and everything's all better now. You know?
It's all better. It's fixed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
that's what I hope to be able to come on and deliver on your show.
Well, hopefully we can. Hopefully you can inspire others, and hopefully through this podcast we can inspire others to turn up the heat a little bit and get their butts moving, or inspire some to even just change
That's my
and
hope.
start
That
to
is my
even
hope.
just start.
Thank you so much for the
That's,
time, Michael. Thanks for having me on.
thank you so much. God bless you, my friend Alex. Blum is my new friend, and he is a Sustainiac. And thank you all for downloading and listening to the story. We'll see you again next time. Peace and love.